Hey guys, All in Crypto here, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for another YouTube video. Hopefully you've all had a happy Monday so far. I know the cryptocurrency market is certainly starting Monday off the right way. You know, we all love to see the markets in green. We are going to be talking about this pump. It is likely that this momentum to the upside is going to persist. So we're probably going to see more upside until Friday's FOMC meeting, which is where the Fed are essentially going to come out and give their CPI stats, which monitors inflation. And I don't think that this CPI print is going to be drastically lower. It could be near the highs that we've seen the CPI come out at, and actually, if not the highs, significantly close to them, which is not really showing that inflation is necessarily peaking and reversing, but more that, you know, it's still persisting. And this is the main mandate that is causing markets to sell off. The Fed have gone from being extremely progressive and supportive towards markets and flooding them with money to now doing the opposite. And that's something that you really need to get your head around. And we are going to look at a number of articles. We've got quite a lot of good stuff coming out this morning. We're going to look into the fact that Coinbase are also cutting costs amid the sort of market downturn. And this was a good article actually from Morgan Stanley, or an article that covered some of the comments from Morgan Stanley. Basically talking about the shift that's taking place with markets and how we've got to adjust to it. You know, it's not the conditions that surround markets right now aren't very progressive. So it's nice that we've seen this pump. We've always maintained the bias that, look, these things don't just go down in straight lines. From a weekly basis, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 red weekly candles. Doesn't mean that the next one had to be green. You know, you could have 10, 12, 13, 14 red candles. But typically after this kind of a prolonged period of downward price action, there is some sort of pushback. And we know that we were building a base at sort of your 28,700 range. We will drop down the timeframes. But just to reiterate on this, we're very much swimming against the tide. Crypto's been looking for relief. It seems to be getting that. We'll see how the stock market opens up. All supported, by the way, and we'll quickly switch to the dollar, by a kind of resting dollar. The dollar sees higher valuations, in my opinion, which is bad for markets. But these things come in stages. And we are very much swimming against the tide. You guys know the reasons that we have set out for this market going lower from a technical point of view and fundamental. You also have technical targets like head and shoulders, bear flags, a number of other things that we're still looking at that are still potentially in play until they've been invalidated to the upside. Also the RSI, long-term regression bands, 200 weekly moving average. You know, there's lots of data here that just can't be ignored that suggests to me we are coming to the downside. And it's not really until we get down here that I'm going to be looking to accumulate. I don't mind not being first into a new bull run. I'd rather wait and see how the land lies because I think there is a lot of risk surrounding markets right now. So before we get into some of the news articles, and what we'll do actually whilst we're here is we'll dive down the timeframes. You know, you're very much doing and I've probably drawn all over this chart, you're very much, it's not as bad as I thought, doing a similar thing over here, which led to a breakdown, to what you're doing over here. Very, very much so. I mean, they're very similar in terms of structure. And this is ultimately the road that I think we take. So in terms of, you know, being a fortune teller and looking into the future, let's try and find a chart that I've not drawn all over. Nope. Bear with me 1 second, guys. We'll just use FTX because I know that I wouldn't have drawn on there. You know, this is very much, if we're looking at this structure over here, this is very much kind of the play, really. You know, we do this, we bottom out, we do something like this, we climb higher before we eventually get that spill, forming a flag-like structure, which is what we had over here. That's what we're anticipating, and that could take us down towards the kind of lower 20s, 20k range. That's what we're ultimately looking out for. We've got macro structure that supports that. We've also got the sort of current financial landscape that's very supportive of it. And we have built a base around here. You know, we've been range trading this. We've now got to break above it. Let's see if we can sort of reclaim some of these levels and push higher before we get that deviation to the downside. Very quickly, guys, we'd spoke about our launch of our Patreon. It's not yet up. It is going to be coming out today. I am going to make a video later on talking you through exactly what you get in this Patreon. It is really me taking things to the next level in terms of education, in terms of understanding the cryptocurrency market, understanding where we are, and looking at altcoins to accumulate for the next cycle that I think are going to do very well, that I've done a lot of research into, and I can sort of present the argument that, look, these may be worth taking a punt on, and also looking at portfolio construction, cryptos that I hold, you name it, guys, regular updates, weekly meetings, newsletters. There's going to be a lot involved in this Patreon that you'll get all of at the sort of Fortune Seeker tier. But we will do a longer video on that later, so please watch out for that. Let's get into a little bit of the news. This was an article that was essentially taken from some comments from Morgan Stanley. A paradigm shift has begun in markets, says Morgan Stanley's TED pick. Here's what to expect. Global markets are in the beginning of a fundamental shift after a 15-year period defined by low interest rates and cheap corporate debt, according to Morgan Stanley's co-president Ted Pick. The transition from the economic conditions that followed the 2008 financial crash and whatever comes next will take 12, 18, 24 months to unfold, he said last week at New York's financial conference. Out of the ashes of a transition period, a new business cycle will emerge, he said. This new business cycle that is going to emerge is going to involve crypto. Bank of America the other day came out and said that they don't use Bitcoin because it's not regulated. Regulation is at the doorstep, guys. We are already in the process of regulating crypto in the United States and in terms of the UK. And both of these absolute financial powerhouses, I watched a very interesting documentary about Britain's offshore empire, if you will, on Netflix. I think it's called The Spider's Web or something. Very interesting for anybody interested in that sort of stuff. These financial powerhouses have both said they want to be at the heart of crypto adoption and the leaders in the space. So this is all coming. Short term, yes, we may see more downside, but eventually this market does do a 180 and we see that upside and we see a new bull run ushered in, probably by a pivot from the Federal Reserve. And also at that point, it's going to be an exceptionally strong place to absolutely fly, given the fact that we're likely to have regulations out on it. So we've got the US inflation expectations jumped to 1 month high ahead of CPI data. Essentially, we're looking for this data print because the Fed's mandate is to basically kill off inflation. They're doing that via interest rate hikes. That's very regressive for markets and doesn't really support them in the terms of free-flowing capital. We did have a slightly, so that the peak as it is of yet was 8.5. We then had 8.3, and now the forecasts are coming in at 8.3 again. So does this overshoot? Could we see it back at 8.5? I think so. But even if it did come out at 8.3 or even 8.2 or 8.1 or even 8, inflation is still exceptionally hot and they're going to need to continue to do what they're doing to fight it. And certainly if we get a higher inflation print, this is when you get that deviation for Bitcoin in the crypto market and we see that slam down. We're still yet to see how the stock market opens. We know the S&P futures has opened to the upside. We are looking almost for some sort of support and resistance flip here. So, this being your prior support, now acting as resistance, some sort of deviation, and then further downside momentum. Also, I think this comes on the back of the Fed and what they're going to do, because all companies are sort of having to adjust right now. June's flashlight for the FOMC blackout period. Interesting choice of words there. They're basically talking about how, no news is really going to change in regards to the fact that we know the Fed are going to start upping interest rates by 50 basis points, or they are going to up it in the next 2 meetings at least, and also start to reduce their balance sheet, which is another way of quantitative tightening. US stocks end week lower after job data bolsters case for the Fed tightening. It's all about the Fed, guys. Stock futures are higher as Wall Street looks to bounce back from losing weeks. And then we've got the last one here, which is talking about Coinbase laying off or reducing, cutting their costs amid the sort of downturn in markets. Everybody's going to have to do it. And this is why the conditions, just from a Coinbase level, they're feeling it in the pocket. Their employees are going to feel it in the pocket. You know, all this trickles down from markets and eventually hits people in the pocket, which means they're going to be less fruitful and forthcoming in regards to putting money into markets when their interest rate on their mortgage is going up, the food prices, housing, you know, you name it, guys. Things are really hurting the consumer. Whilst there's extremely high inflation as well, it doesn't provide the most fruitful time for markets, in my opinion, which is why we're still biased that there's more downside and still until we see some sort of a significant paradigm change occur with the Fed. And the good news is, I was looking at the dollar. The dollar is going to go up until it goes back down. And the reason it goes back down is when the Fed pivot. And that's going to be something that we're watching and paying attention for, to know that we can start maybe looking to get aggressively back into markets. We still hold quite a bit of crypto, but we also hold quite a bit of cash, looking to capitalize on whatever comes next. So the dollar, I think, is going to continue to run. I'm not sure if I still have my targets up here. Yeah, I think the dollar is likely to get up to here. You know, maybe just something like this, sort of churns up. And then I think at this point, a couple of months in, Fed continue to do rate hikes, something breaks, and then they have to completely renege and go back onto I don't think it's going to be quite like that, but maybe somewhere down here, go back into really flooding markets with money and being very progressive to kind of bolster up the economy and undoing all the damage that they've previously done. And that's when we go, right, we're all loading up on crypto, and the Patreon is going to really help people to do that. I think not only that, it's also going to pick out some absolute altcoin gems that I don't see anybody talking about, that have the likes of partners with Microsoft, you know, Google, some serious heavy hitters out there that we're going to be giving you within this Patreon. And also not just giving you the picks, explaining why it is I've picked these as coins that I want to accumulate in my portfolio from a blue chip perspective, things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano, you know, your kind of main layer ones and Bitcoin, to a sort of more risky plays, and then very risky sort of 100x mooners. That's all I've got for you in this video, guys. If you've enjoyed this content, a like is always appreciated, so is a comment, and I look forward to seeing each and every one of you in the next YouTube video. Thanks a lot for watching. Stay tuned for the Patreon video later on, and I'll catch you all in the next one. See you later, guys.